It's a challenge to go in, but I don't worry about it.
I feel yeah, but I mean, they're all that's like straws.
Yeah, I guess I could just leave it on.
Okay, we all ready? Pretty good? Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so I'd like to call the January 25th. Okay. Okay. All right, it's still 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call the January 25th, 2024 Lower Saucon Township Planning Commission meeting to order. We're going to start with roll call. I'm Craig Kalogi. Chris Nagy is not here. Jeff Schmel.
Present.
Jennifer Peters.
Present.
Tom Bartek.
Present.
Veronica Gress.
Present.
Sarav Kaushik. Present. Okay, if we can all stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we start tonight's meeting, we need to reorganize for the year. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to our solicitor and let him kind of direct the order here.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I'm Steve Kitsuzian. I was appointed the interim solicitor for Lower Saucon Township last night, and I'm happy to be here today. Whenever a entity or a board meets for the first time, whenever a cycle turns, they have to reorganize, which means that they have to choose a chairman, a vice chairman, and so on. It can be a relatively formal or informal process. Normally, for a planning commission, it's somewhat informally done compared to others. The process would be that somebody can nominate a chair, and then theoretically the nominations are supposed to close, and then you vote on the person. So for argument's sake, I can't do it, but I'm just saying, if you were to do it with me, you would nominate me, and then see if somebody else wanted to be nominated also. We would go through the nomination process. When that was done, you then vote. And if I was voted as chair, fine, and then we move to vice chair, and we continue down that road. So that's what we have to do before we actually conduct our official business for today. So the first question would be, would anybody like to make a nomination for the election of the chair? And it can be anyone who sits on the planning commission. It's totally your choice. I don't want to I'm new, so I don't want to volunteer anyone, but Mr. Kalogi has sat as the chair in the past.
I'd like to nominate him. Be chair.
And theoretically, if we're going to do this as formally as possible, it would be a second. Does anybody want a second?
Awesome.
Very well. Are there any other nominations? And hearing none, then we would call for a vote. And the way this would work, Paul, do you normally do that, or would you like me to do that? Okay, then we'll call for a vote, and if we could either do it as a show of hands or go from left to right and then just identify yourself and say yes or no. What's easiest for you guys?
Oh, okay. I don't care. Veronica Gress, yes.
Yes.
Jeff Schmel, yes.
I'll abstain.
Tom Bartek, yes.
Saucon Township, yes.
So that we can have the record reflect that it was a unanimous vote with one absence. Now we have a vice chair. We have to nominate a vice chair for the planning commission. So would anybody like to make a nomination?
Is there anybody? Well, I'll nominate Jeff Schmel.
I appreciate that, but I'll
Okay.
decline. Thank you.
Is there anybody who would like to? So tonight we have 3 new members, so it's, I don't want to put anybody on the spot as far as that goes. So it's, the responsibilities of the vice chair, they would take over the chairman's duties when the chairman isn't here, so.
So generally as a rule, if you're brand new, you might not want to serve in that capacity. If there's only a few of us who have sat in the past, they would be the appropriate initial choices, if you're so inclined. It doesn't have to be that way. I'm half joking, but you can always punish the person who doesn't show up today.
I was just gonna say that.
And we could do that, and then we can discuss it later, and if we have to reorganize again, or he chooses not to be vice chair, we can address that at that time.
So Chris is the secretary, so he does have a certain, he does have a role, an official role, so, he's been on the commission for a while, so. I'll nominate Chris Nick.
Are there any other nominations? Is there a second? Someone should second.
I'll second.
Very well. And then we can vote. And this we can do in a group. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the record will reflect it's unanimous. And then we have to elect a secretary.
So the secretary's responsibilities are, if the chair and vice chair are not here, they would run the meeting. And their, the other role is they sign the final plans. When the plans are to be recorded, there's a signature on the plan from the secretary. So Jennifer, since you're not the newest member here, I'll nominate, Chris, you just missed that, so. I'll nominate Jennifer for secretary.
I'll second that.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against? And again, the record will reflect it's unanimous. And then I'll give it to Greg if you want. Normally we will set our times for our meetings, and normally we rely on Molly and the staff to tell us when that is.
They're generally the fourth Thursday of the month. There are, I think, 2 months, December and November, that we will do the third Thursdays. And we always met at 7 o'clock.
So then what we do is we take a vote to go ahead and establish the schedule that Molly suggested.
So I'll move that we keep the meetings at the fourth Thursday at 7 p.m.
I'll second
All in favor?
Aye.
So that concludes the reorganization portion of the meeting. Chris, you weren't here, so and as Chris arrived for the minutes at 7:05, and you are now the vice chair. So. Yeah, good news, bad news. You're no longer secretary. So, all right, so the first item on the agenda, typically we do public comment, citizen agenda items. I'm going to suggest that we move that to after the business item, so if there's anybody in the audience that has any comments on that application, they could ask them at that time, if that's okay. So first item of business would be the Route 412 Commercial Development Sketch Plan.
Can I just interrupt you? Jen Peters, I'm going to be recusing myself as St.Lukes is involved with this project, and I am employed by St.Lukes.
Okay, I'll also, Sharab Kaushik. My wife is an employee of St.Lukes, so it might be appropriate for me to recuse myself as well.
So if for members who choose to recuse yourself, you have the option, you can certainly remain here and just not participate in this particular item, or if you felt more comfortable, you can sit in the back too. So whatever you feel more comfortable doing.
So I am Tom Bartek. I am not going to recuse myself, but I do have a relationship starting up tomorrow with Keystone Engineering. We will be hiring them as our engineer for where I work. But that should not impinge on my decision.
Can I just ask that everybody make sure they have their microphones turned on?
There's nothing on the monitors.
No, it's unplugged currently.
Okay.
So, but just push your mics to make sure the green button.
Would you heard that?
I did.
Okay, I'm sorry. So if I may, just so when we have the records reflecting, when the time comes for the minutes, that Mr. Kaushik has recused himself and Ms. Peters has recused herself. And before we get started, for the new members of the planning commission, what was before you, just so we're aware of, so we can sort of set the stage for this, is called a sketch plan. So a sketch plan is is the preliminary way that a developer would come before the township or the planning commission, and essentially they'll say, this is what we're thinking of doing, this is our concept. So it is not as specific or in-depth as you might have down the line. This is an opportunity for the planning commission to provide an indication of what they find favorable, what they don't find favorable, and so on. You don't, at the end of a sketch plan, you don't vote formally, but what you end up doing is telling the developers informally, this is what we liked about it, this is what we didn't like, this is what we'd like to see, with the concept that they would then come back with a much more formal or much more in-depth presentation, which would then meet or not meet various requirements. So for today's purposes, especially for the people who are new, keep that in mind. The process normally works where the engineer has provided a letter outlining the various issues that have arisen, and rather than going point by point by point, the developer, either through their representatives or their engineer, will indicate they're in agreement with most or they're not in agreement, and we'll talk about the issues that exist. And then the process is the planning commission can ask questions and have a conversation. It's normally done in a relatively informal manner, and then subsequently the public can also become involved. So that's the idea. So I wanted to sort of give you the ground rules. Some of you have been doing this for a long time, and I apologize for saying what you obviously know, but some of you, it's new. Thank you.
Very helpful. Yeah, thank you, Steve. All right, so if you want to introduce yourselves, starting with Dennis.
I'm Dennis Fenner, I'm the property owner. I'm here together with St.Lukes as the applicant or co-applicant for this project. St.Lukes is anticipating a medical office building at this facility. With me tonight is Mr. Pastersky with Keystone Engineering, St. Louis Council, Steve Boyle, and Mary J. McKeever. She's the head of real estate for St. Louis.
Thank you. All right, so if you want to jump in and just kind of tell us what you're planning there.
I'm sorry to jump in, I just want to ask if you can pull the microphone. It's in front of Mr., both of them actually, because you could probably use both of them, but if you look at your microphone, it has a red, it's a colored red, it means it's off. So you, yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
So again, I'll kick off very briefly. My name is Steve Powell, as Dennis indicated. I'm legal counsel for St. Luke's. Steve candidly knocked off the first bullet point I had, which was explain what a sketch plan is. And as Steve indicated, we're here tonight to get your comments relative to the layout of the plan and those general comments, and also have a discussion about the comments in the Township Engineer's review letter. A couple other comments I want to make to introduce the project is St. Luke's actually currently has 2 applications that are pending, only one of which is before you tonight. The first one is a sketch plan application, but within our initial due diligence with Dennis, we've actually identified that the development of a medical office, or any use really on this property, will require 4 zoning variances. Scott is going to walk you through what those zoning variances relate to. Having practiced in this township before, they're not unusual zoning variances. They have to do with things, and those of you that have been on the planning commission, you've probably heard these before, things like woodlands disturbance and steep slopes and things like that. Although those zoning variances will be heard by the zoning hearing board, one of the things we very much want to hear tonight are your feelings about those variances. Are you supportive of them? Do you have any concerns about them, and how can we address those concerns? Scott will go into greater detail, but give you a 10-second summary of the justification for the variances. Is where the driveway is in that property, that's where the bulk of those resources are. And that this driveway, as Scott will walk through, is located very, very intentionally where it is because it aligns with the shopping center that's giant across the street, which is really the only logical place on the property you can build that driveway. And that's a pretty, for us, very compelling legal hardship. So the batting order tonight is Mary Jane, who's the Senior Vice President of Real Estate for St. Luke's. MJ oversees St. Luke's real estate holdings, their leasing, their acquisition, and also a lot of the network development type issues. MJ is going to give you an overview of St. Luke's general intention for the property, and then Scott will go through the engineering details.
MJ?
Yeah, great, thanks, Steve. Thank you all for your time tonight. We're very excited to be talking about this project, which we think will really be wonderful for Lower Saucon Township. We have a medical office building in Hellertown with a family practice and a lab outreach office. They're at capacity. We've been looking for some time for a great location, and we've been working with Dennis to acquire the property that's called Buffalo LLC, right across from the giant shopping center. So St.Lukes, we have provided with you tonight, I think earlier, a sketch plan and I think some directionally an idea of what we would like this building to look like. I think we also provided you with pictures of other buildings that St.Lukes has constructed. We're working with architects. We think we bring a lot of beautiful buildings to communities. We want to enhance access to care from for our neighbors. I'm a Lower Saucon resident as well, so I'm excited that St.Lukes is interested in constructing this building in Lower Saucon Township, providing great access to care. We love this parcel. We think it's great in terms of being across from the giant supermarket at a signalized intersection. And we're looking forward to talking through the parcel and the plan with you. And so I guess I'll turn it over to Scott.
This microphone is not staying on. All right, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm Scott Pastersky with Keystone Consulting Engineers. So just to pick up, a lot of my bullet points were taken by the first two in the lineup here. However, I can jump right into it. I'm going to start on the plan that perhaps is not as exciting. To zoom out, this is the existing features plan, and you all know where the site is by this point. It's right across from the giant shopping center. Just wanted to point out a couple of things before we get into the actual proposal and describe what's going on. This site is actually comprised of 3 current tracks, and I'm attempting to kind of trace them right now with my mouse, maybe doing a poor job of it. There's a tract here in the front that's directly across from the driveway. There's another tract right here, and then the one that kind of wraps around everything. The site is located, the project site is located on the consolidation of those 3 tracks. When you combine those 3 tracks, it's just over 6 acres in size, 6.11 if you like details. The underlying zoning is general business. Within the general business district, medical offices is an approved use. And you'll see in a minute, the plan that we laid out is compliant to all the dimensional requirements as far as setbacks, etc. And again, this right here is the giant shopping center, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. So we go to the fund plan. All right, so as was said, this was our general layout. Just very basic information. We have 30,000 square foot of medical office space proposed. That would be located on 2 separate levels. There's 2 15,000 square foot plates. This rectangle that you see right here is 15,000 square feet. 2 of those levels with a ground level ground level parking. So you could drive under here, and there's a small detail here showing you what it could look like. It's just a sketch plan. But approximately 30 spaces of the proposed 150 parking spaces would be proposed to be provided underneath the building. This is not a completely unusual or never heard of idea. St.Lukes has a similar facility in Whitehall Township on MacArthur Road, right at Shot Avenue, where they did the exact same thing. Slightly smaller, but a little bit smaller, but the same concept. So the site, as you can see, once the lots are consolidated, is a little bit unusually shaped. So we had to work the site around the property, but however, we feel the parking layout is adequate to serve the practitioners, the staff, the patients very well. Again, we believe we've complied with all zoning. Another important point I wanted to point out is a good portion of the site is woodland, and this proposal is to leave it woodland. For this entire area over here, you can see we actually individually surveyed every tree in here and also outlined the rough edges of the woods. With regards to the access, again, for good access management principles, this is located right across from the giant parking lot. That's a signalized intersection currently. It would remain signalized. And we would create this driveway to basically mirror what's going on the shopping center side. Even though this particular use, and I'll talk about traffic in a minute, does have a traffic impact of about 1,000 trips per day, which would trigger a traffic impact study in accordance with the ordinance, which we understand. However, the footprint of this driveway is most likely, does not have to be this large, but we wanted to mirror what was going on over here. And plus, we're contemplating a potential, if it's ever feasible, and we can't comment on that, but if it's ever feasible to extend this alignment for future use, we wanted to be set up to do that. But in the immediate or in perpetuity, we would leave this driveway for the single access to the site. Excuse me. So moving on, with regards to traffic impacts, as I mentioned, it's a little over 1,000 trips per day based on current estimates using the ITE manual, which is the traffic geek way of determining these things. Also, in the AM peak hour, the morning rush hour, when everyone's going to work and school and everything, it's about a little over 80 vehicles in the peak hour time, and about 120 vehicles roughly in the PM peak hour. Everyone's coming home from work in the rush hour, basically. And so that, in traffic circles, that's a very low traffic impact. However, like I said, we would be providing a traffic impact study for the township's ordinances. Moving on, we have this plan is just a sketch plan, so it's not fully engineered. It's typical of a sketch plan. It just shows layout compliance with zoning, hopefully. But things like the vertical design, the grading of the site, the details of the utilities, the stormwater are not depicted on this plan, but I can touch briefly on each one of those so you know what we're thinking. We have spent a good amount of time and effort thinking through those things to make sure what we have here would actually work. With regards to water service, there is existing water in the giant parking lot, actually, roughly where I'm motioning here. There's also water in Springtown Hill Road that kind of comes to this strange intersection down here. We have had discussions with the Lower Saucon Authority engineer, and although the most direct access to the site would be to connect it right here with probably a directional drill under the roadway, they have asked the applicant to consider connecting that utility to connect the loop. And in water engineering, having a loop system is generally better. It creates redundancy. If there's a problem on one area, you can still serve from another area. In addition, hydraulically, it performs better, is their belief. And I can't certainly comment on that, but certainly that would be considered as part of our application. With regards to sanitary sewer service, there's a existing manhole that it's off this page, actually. It's not depicted. But from the building would run along the right-of-way of Leesville Road or State Road 412, either across public right-of-way, the applicant's property, or Lower Saucon Authority property, if we can squeeze it in there, and direct to that existing manhole. Now, I think maybe some of you are not aware, but probably most are aware, if you've been here any length of time, the township has a lift station public works project that is in the process of being designed and bid out and things like that. So no sewer could flow down that pipe until that lift station was operational, constructed and operational, and so we understand that. Just briefly, with regards to water, there's three-phase electric on the other side of Leesville Road. There's also a UGI gas, both with no issues perceived to serve the building in that respect. Lastly, and I'll be done, I know I'm throwing a lot of information. I want to open it up to questions. And I wanted to ask a few questions myself with regards to Hanover's letter. But with regards to stormwater, again, just a sketch plan, not fully designed. However, we are contemplating stormwater is mostly going to be managed with underground facilities under the parking lots, which is very typical for a development of this nature when you have space constraints and not a lot of open land. And we manage it with respect to rate control, volume control, most likely a spray irrigation system to spray the undeveloped portions of the proposed grass areas and even spray into the wooded area to meet the requirements of our DEP permitting and also the township stormwater management ordinance. And with respect to site grading, it is a relatively steeply sloped site. It's about 7 to 8% average slope across as you go from west to east. North is to the right, should have mentioned that. And, but we believe we can accomplish that. Hopefully, we might need a few retaining walls, but we believe we can largely accomplish that with just normal site grading. So I neglected to mention in the beginning, we are in receipt of Hanover's January 19th letter. And unless there's any immediate questions on my presentation, I did have a few questions for the board that I'd like to pose, but I think I'd open it up first to any questions you may have.
The one lot on Springtown Hill Road that you're taking, there's currently a house on that lot that's gonna come down, is that what's happening there?
Yes. Correct.
What's the setback from the building to the road?
From the zoning setback,
Yeah.
let me zoom in, I didn't remember. I believe it's 25 feet. Let's see if I'm right.
Just easy, okay. There's a considerable, that area there is considerably higher than the parking lot at the Giant. Do you know the difference
Yeah.
between that?
I do. And you might be, I should address something here. We had this dashed out as a stormwater management area, which I completely realize that's at the top of the hill. So on first glance, what are you doing? You know, who hired this guy? What that's for, first of all, we can back pitch water into the basin. The initial intent was to take some water from Mount Pleasant Road and bring it into the basin and kind of overcompensate, basically let a little more water on the site run off and capture that. As we investigated it further, most likely there will not be a basin here. This would be an area reserved to spray. So that's in order to manage the water, we have to spray the water into grass areas or undeveloped areas. And it's probably going to be more useful as a spray area than it would be as a basin. Again, just a sketch, not fully evaluated. However, that's where our current thinking is on that matter.
What do you anticipate the cross slope on the parking lot to be?
That's a great question. Industry standard is 5% or less for a parking lot. Otherwise, you get things like doors banging into other cars.
You're definitely going to 5%. 5% is pretty steep for a parking lot.
Right, it's an industry maximum. It's not necessarily desirable. I like to keep them at 4%. That's just the way, 20 years ago, that's how my boss taught me. So we're going to try to maintain a comfortable slope. Most likely, we will have, the building itself will be elevated a few feet above the road. So that's going to take care of some of the grade difference. We'll pitch the water away from the building, probably create a gutter line either here or maybe here, and come up as fast as we can without sacrificing the quality of the parking lot. So that could be 3%, that could be 4% if, depending on the way it's pitched. If it's pitched along the longitudinal portion of the car, that's not as bad. If the cars are stacked sideways and they're on a steep slope, you open the door and there it goes, and you get a nick in your whoever's parked next to you. So that has to be looked at very carefully and thought through and make sure it's something that we're going to be happy with when we're done. To answer your question directly, about 3 to 4% is what would be end up with.
So I have a question. Has the land been perked?
Excuse me?
Have you perked everything? Have you done your work?
No, I mean, so with respect to sewer, that's proposed to be public. With respect to this particular BMP, it's best management practice, that's what we need to provide. We would use, with spray irrigation, especially on new ground, you use what's called an evapotranspiration rate. So I think it's a half inch per hour per day, or you can, about 3 inches, you don't need to perk it, let me just sum it up that way. If you do perk an area that's undeveloped and it comes out better, you can use it, but we based our feasibility on what we're guaranteed to get, regardless of how it perks.
Are you planning on designing some rain gardens with all this as well?
If it's feasible, in this area right here, if we can get some water to it and design it for volume control, also for water quality, that would be an area, any place where you see white, perhaps in this area here, we could consider that. I just know, do we have a fail-safe method? We actually have two. We have spray irrigation, and there's another one, but I won't worry with the details.
Because I know some of the islands in the parking lot, the white spaces, they could be designed as rain gardens, the way of how you allow the water to enter it. But just make sure that you have curbing all around that so that, snow removal doesn't destroy what you're retaining the water in there for, allowing water to penetrate back down.
Good point. That will certainly be considered. This is all proposed to be curbed as well.
Okay. But I'm saying with the slope of the grade that you're allowed to, you probably manage some of that water to those areas and make those inside areas rain gardens if you choose.
Right. So that's an option on the table, absolutely.
Where you have the road, the future, I guess, road extension, where driveway's coming in there,
Yes.
the possible future road extension, I guess we'll call it. What's that gonna look like when it's finished? Are we gonna leave that like that, or with the curb return like that, or are we gonna curb across there?
That would depend on, I mean, the water's not gonna be flowing. If the water was gonna escape the pavement and head onto the neighbor's property, we would have to manage it and capture it.
I'm just looking at it more from the aesthetic point of view.
Gotcha. You know, maybe we show it like it's a stub. We could probably revise that a little bit, so it doesn't look like a stub, that kind of, you know, so it bends around with the radius. It looks more intentional, not like, hey, there's something else going to happen.
I think I almost have to put some sort of a barrier there so that, you know, we were all kids at one time and they're gonna drive through this and make havoc, so maybe some sort of a barrier so you don't continue
Right.
on the property.
Yeah, maybe something, I think just to finish.
Yeah, that's the point I was making.
Yeah.
If we actually curb that,
Right.
we don't need a barrier, and it will look nicer
But
finished.
But provide that right of way to the property line. And how would you envision that being constructed? Say, if it ever comes to building that in the future, would the property owner be responsible for building that portion of that, the remainder of that roadway?
You mean the extension of the
Yeah.
roadway? I would, that's a, I don't know, I can answer that right now. That's something that would have to be discussed.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that might be something that, well, when we get into the plan itself, that's a detail we'd probably like to get worked out. I mean, certainly you're not responsible for off-the property, but maybe on your property, so to finish that road at some point in the future.
Yeah, I mean, MJ will say, I think St. Luke's would be thrilled if that became a through road right there. Beyond the benefits to the community, I mean, obviously, the hospital, and I think the township could expect full cooperation.
And
St. Luke's through that process.
And there might be a desire to make that even, you know, offer for public dedication, if you want to make it a through road and discontinue, you know, do something else with the road line through there, make that part of the official township road.
Yeah, I mean, as part of land development, we're more than happy to work through those details.
It would definitely offset the awkwardness of entering Spring Road from 412, which is that always is a high traffic area for the future.
One of the whole purposes for this was an anticipation of some future point that you will connect that.
Yeah.
It makes
I see that.
sense. It definitely does.
Mhm. I have a question about properties. So on Springtown Road, there's two properties, correct?
One on either side
One
of our
on the
property.
side, and then
Yeah.
one in the back by Mount Pleasant. And is that all grass behind that property of Mount Pleasant in between? No.
Mount Pleasant here, right? Or-
Yeah, and this property, that's all this. That's all woods. So what I'm getting at is light pollution. You know, all these big buildings go up and you're a neighbor, you're used to darkness. I don't like light pollution at all. And I don't think there's consideration. Everyone, all these buildings today, so I live next to the big box buildings, they have these lights on their buildings shining out. The lights should be at the parking lot shining in and away from residents. And the light intensity should be another factor of not this high, bright, intense LED lighting, something soft, all down lighting, which you know that's what you want to do. So I'm a big guy on light pollution. We're used to darkness and seeing the stars and whatnot, and I know this is a higher concentration of some commercial things going on, but anything we can do to make sure that residents have some maintained of some darkness, that's a great thing to try to do.
Right.
So as part of the land development plan submission, you'll be submitting a lighting plan. The township does have light standards, you know, maximum 16 foot, there's we'll cut off all that to address that. But those details we'll see when the land development plan comes in, and you'll be able to review it.
Because there's going to be some parking lot lighting, and I just want to make sure that, you know, it's not impinging on the residents currently there.
And Scott and I have done a number of St. Luke's projects together before, and this is not the only one we've done where there's nearby residences. St. Luke's is very intentional in the process they use on the lighting, in terms of all those types of controls we're just talking about, where the direction, the types of bulbs that are used and all those things. When we come back to that lighting plan, we'll demonstrate to you that we truly do not have any adverse impact on the neighbors.
No, I just want to be an advocate for the residents.
Sure.
So,
There's a property, it looks like it's south of the basin, I guess, on, it's on Mount Pleasant Road there. It's not shown on the map here, I guess it would be under, somewhere around where the legend is. There's an existing home there.
Okay.
Is that, so it seems like they're gonna be impacted by this parking lot and what's going on here. Is there a plan? I don't see any kind of a buffer there. I know that they're showing that it's wooded, but I'm looking on a map here and it looks like they're not gonna have much of a buffer here.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because I forgot to mention that in my presentation. Where you see the green circles here, there's two things that are going to provide a buffer between anybody on Mount Pleasant Road, residents, traveling public, or whatever, and from seeing the building, which will be beautiful.
Yes.
I mean, St.Lukes always does a great job. However, if someone doesn't want to see intermixed a residential feel to a medical office feel, we have evergreen buffering proposed. These have a mature height of about 40 to 50 feet. Not only would the trees provide a visual screen, but just as I mentioned, one of the good things about the grade of the site is we've got about 15 feet of the site is buried by the fact that we're higher here and lower here. So the grade is going to help immensely to cover most, I could say most, maybe about half of the building, and the dense evergreen screen would cover the rest. And again, this is just conceptual, but we've staggered it to allow some overlap of trees to make sure there's no gaps.
So you don't think we'll need something on the south side of that parking lot? Because where that guy is located, he's right under where it said, where the legend is, where it says legend. I'm
Right.
assuming that's right about where his house is.
Right. Well, I mean, this here, I mean, they're gonna be complete, there's woods over here, and I believe there's.
Yeah, that's
woods
not
over here.
helping. Do you have
Oh,
a
if he's
reason
off,
to have
okay,
on
if
there?
he's, I see what you're saying.
That's then that Keck's property. We've had conversations with them, then at Keck, and we represented that we will buffer along that would be the south side of that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of grade change from that line down to where her home is also. So just what Scott said in terms of where that office building is in terms of that grade change. With the trees they're gonna plant up on top of it, it's a similar thing on the south side of that property.
Okay, yeah, we can't see it under, we don't see the
Yeah,
grade.
you don't see it.
So that would be something we'd like to see when you come back in with the application.
I'm ready to call it, Jim.
I'll also say that as part of the lighting plan, again, Scott can speak to this. St. Louis has worked with municipalities where it's in a residential district in terms of dimming certain lights after operational hours. These are not 24-hour-a-day buildings, as MJ said. These are going to be more specialty practices we're going to close out. And again, certain lights have to stay off the safety, as you know, but they really do try to work with the township to identify a lighting plan that may get through that.
Okay. So first of all, the site that you're talking about is on Water Street, that would be moving over to here, the St. Luke's site?
The existing
So what are the existing, your existing,
The existing practice
On Water
is
Street?
in Hellertown.
yeah, on Water Street?
I don't know.
On Main Street.
It's not on Main Street.
No, it's on Water
the
Street.
side.
All right, that's not, but my
255
question,
Front Street.
is
Front
it
Street.
Front Street? I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Front
yeah.
Street, yes. So my next question is this, the other thing I'd like to see is a lot more green over the parking lots, to shade the parking lots, the asphalt. Oftentimes it's just a sea of black asphalt, and it's just heat after heat after heat. And anything we can do to protect the environment by planting more trees, I know it's a cleanup issue, but it does help. Part of what we're all trying to do is get a better green earth.
Right, so, agree, similar to the lighting, that'll be part of the land development, we'll have a landscaping and lighting plan, actually they'll be separated.
Okay.
In the landscaping, the ordinance has, I think it's one tree every 500 square foot of impervious surfaces is required by the ordinance, and that'll all be detailed on the land development.
I do have two sort of planning issues to start to think about when you put the plan together. So the township has historically recognized that the alignment of Spring Hill Road and 412 is not the best alignment in its current condition. So the township has in the past studied a connection like this from across the street from Giant. Question is, no one has ever decided where it will end up, whether it'll end up on Mount Pleasant or Springtown Hill. If the township gives some thought to that now, at least we can point your portion in the right direction, at least to the best that we can now, so that you don't build it and somebody has to move it in the future. That's the first thing. And then the second thing, for the benefit of the new members especially, as Scott mentioned, the Lower Saucon Authority has a temporary pump station for sewage right now in that triangle at Springtown Hill and 412. That is being eliminated and moving further north. When that happens, council has to decide what properties get allocated that sewage. So that I do not believe that's happened from the council aspect. So that particular allocation has to be sought by St.Lukes with the council as they determine what the service area of that pump station will ultimately be.
Actually, St.Lukes acknowledges and knows that they'll have to do an amendment of the 537 plan as a part of this process.
So this particular property is not in the sewer service area currently?
Well, there's, the current pump station really doesn't have a sewer service area, it's giant, but there was sewage planning done for the new location, but that actual allocation step that council has to make and acknowledge what that area is, I do not believe they've done that
yet. I'm sure it has a certain capacity. Is that capacity,
It has
more demand than what the capacity is going to have?
Yes.
Exist?
The
Okay.
authority knows what that is and will communicate that to the township when the allocation portion comes.
Makes sense.
Yeah, we appreciate that comment. We understand that. So Scott, two more things just to facilitate the discussion on them. Can you talk about the variances, and then I think you did say you had a couple questions on the letter.
One of the questions, we can start with what Attorney Boyle was mentioning. If we can skip to the zoning comments, does everyone have a copy of the letter? Zoning comments are on, looks like section B.
This is the Hanover January 19th letter.
I do have a couple of copies. And so all this is basically saying is this is what was referenced earlier in the presentation, that this, we believe, and we've reviewed this letter in detail with respect to the other zoning comments, and we feel good about those, and I don't think we have any real questions. But with respect to what's called the natural resource section of the zoning ordinance, and just what it is briefly, let me go to the existing features plan for a moment. You can see them mapped on this plan. The zoning ordinance identifies several types of items that would be on a site that would be considered a natural resource. That would include a woodland, that would include a steep slope area. Sometimes if it's the combination of the two, that's called an environmentally sensitive woodland. So these, and the steep slopes in particular, are divided up into ranges. So I think it's 0 to 8 is one range, 8 to 15, 15 to 25% slope, and then greater than 25% slope. And the intensity of those slopes are indicated by the darker shading in these areas. So long story short, there's a significant portion, as Steve had said, of those natural resources. You can see the steep slopes here right across from the driveway. You can also see the woodlands. Actually, here's the edge of the woods right here. A lot of those woodlands are getting disturbed, in addition to elsewhere on the site as well. That our layout, in any way we've tried to do it, cannot avoid exceeding the allowable disturbance areas that the zoning ordinance outlines. So we have done a calculation of natural resources, which is just an itemized area calculation of each resource individually. And in doing so, we exceed the amount of area that we're allowed to disturb. And I won't rattle off the amounts, but, well, I guess I will, because it won't take but a moment. In slope areas of 8 to 15%, we are allowed 0.34 acres. We're disturbing 0.79 for a difference of almost half an acre. 25% or greater slopes, we have a relief of 0.07 acres that's required for natural resource of woodlands. We have almost 3/4 of an acre that we can't meet. And then for environmentally sensitive woodlands, which are the combination of 2 woodlands and another natural resource, we have a little over 1/10 of an acre that we cannot mitigate with this layout. So we realize that this is the zoning ordinance we're talking about, and that's the jurisdiction of the zoning hearing board, and any decision would need to be rendered by the zoning hearing board. But as the planning commission, do you have a recommendation or any thoughts or concerns about those variances in light of and with respect to everything you've heard so far?
If I may, before anybody responds, as a planning commission, you have no obligation to affirmatively answer this question. I'm not saying it's done improperly in any sense, I'm not suggesting, but you don't have to answer it, number one. Number two, at the sketch plan stage, anything that you indicate isn't binding. So you're not, even if you say something and you might want to change your mind later, it's okay. And ultimately, as indicated by their engineer appropriately, if they need to obtain zoning relief, they would not come before the planning commission. They'd go to the zoning hearing board, they'd have to meet certain requirements. So it wouldn't be your ultimate decision anyway. So with that understanding, if you want to respond back and give your thoughts, you certainly may. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, but also don't feel obligated like you have to.
I'm going to respond. So, any of those disturbances would require the retaining walls, and that's what you spoke of.
No,
I'd hire elevation areas. That's where the retaining walls are going to be coming in.
No, it wouldn't be pertaining, it's just the parking area, the driveway and parking areas, if you will, step on those environmentally sensitive areas, and we can't do this layout without stepping on those areas.
Okay. Sorry.
Would you characterize the slopes along the road as, are they man-made as a result of building the roadway to begin with, or what's the genesis of those two, in your opinion?
I think I actually, when I did the initial subdivision from the Keck property, my engineer, with the same firm, told me and indicated that the slope along 412 really was man-made as a result of building the road out there. Nonetheless, it's there.
Yeah.
But it was a man-made slope.
I mean, personally, I'd like to just reserve comment on that until we see how you deal with some of these other issues we talked about tonight, whether it's the lighting and the landscaping and some of those other things, before I give you any direction.
You didn't have any geotech studies yet or anything of that nature done?
Not geologist studies based for infiltration, no.
Okay.
Not yet, no.
As part of the initial subdivision, I did have perk work, perk work done here, and this property does perk.
Any other, do you want to ask Hanover any other?
I do have good, just a few more questions from the letter. While we're on the zoning comments, we could probably handle these both together. With respect to comment number 6 and comment number 10, both are pertaining to buffer yards. One is a buffer yard provided along abutting residential uses. And number 10, a buffer yard is required to separate parking areas from side property lines. Just want to confirm that we're on the same page, and maybe it is more of a question for Brian. So the buffer yards we have here, they're coincident with the setbacks. or whoever, I'm not trying to say who has to answer this, they're coincident with the setbacks and it's okay for them to exist within the setback, is my understanding, is that correct?
I think the ordinance does allow that, but it does say one way or the other in there. I don't know what section it is right now.
Okay,
But I'd be happy to review that with you if you call me.
sure.
But I think the ordinance does give guidance on that, and it is allowed.
That was my reading of it, but I just wanted to confirm because it's so important, because if it can't, then that drastically changes our layout.
I'd be happy to review that with you.
Okay, thank you, that'd be helpful. All right, and so the buffering, like I said, we did have the opportunity, not me personally, but to meet with the township staff, and we indicated some of the concerns that were expressed here about buffering from the residential neighborhood, and so we did, in response to that, provide the buffering along Mount Pleasant. But as far as side lot lines and things like that, what would the expectation be as far as if there's existing woods there, would that count as buffering? Do we have to plant more trees on top of that? It's really a minor detail, but I want to be some clarity.
It can, and it's a matter of you explaining to them and showing them what's there to say it meets the requirements of buffer. And then it needs to be protected and identified as a buffer, just like a new buffer would be, so that they're not cut down the next day. So,
Okay, fair enough. I think I got my answers unless someone else wanted to.
yeah, I mean, that
Okay.
answers that.
And I just had actually 2 more questions on this letter. If we can actually go back a page. Comment number, it's the subdivision and land development review, comments number 5 and 7. So these are basically the site has 3 separate frontages. So along Leesville Road or State Road 412, along Mount Pleasant from about here, if you can see my cursor, to here, and this is a different property. And then on Springtown Hill Road from here to here. And per the ordinance, the Saldo ordinance, there are improvements required, such as widening of the road to whatever the use of the road, if it's a collector road or local road, a certain width as specified in the ordinance, to put sidewalk in, and then in comment number 7, also to dedicate additional right-of-way to match the standard cross-section for the road classification that these roads would be. And so, with respect to Springtown Hill Road and Mount Pleasant, since these, typically in these types of situations where you only have a small amount of frontage and you're kind of landlocked on either side with properties that are not required to do this, we requested deferral for these. Not saying we would never do it, or St.Lukes would never do it, but it doesn't make sense to do it now. And so for these 2 properties, for the road wide, because think about it, if you're driving down the road and this road is say 22 to 24 foot wide, and then it gets to be 30 foot wide, and then it stops again abruptly, and there's sidewalk only for a stretch of the road, it seems a little out of place. So I wanted to get...
Are there sidewalk on the adjacent properties? Is there?
No. The township would decide when that deferral would be called in, when it was appropriate. The township would have the complete authority as to if and when that ever occurs.
Upon the approval, St.Lukes would sign an agreement or whatever, a plan note, whatever's required, saying that whenever someone else widens that road, puts the sidewalk in, they have to install it. And then that would actually just have to go through a project over in South Whitehall where they had to install a sidewalk under those circumstances.
And that would be for all 3 of your frontage roads, that you'd request that deferral.
Well, the only difference is on SR 412, since it is a PennDOT road and we will have a PennDOT highway occupancy permit, we would actually request a waiver because, PennDOT's going to dictate what that road needs to look like.
Okay.
So the request would be a little different for that.
Yeah, so that, we'll have to deal with that when the actual submission comes in, one waiver and 2 deferrals. But, I mean, the township's ordinance could tell you need to curb the sidewalk now for 412. I think that would result in a much greater natural resource disturbance if we run it that. And I don't think there's any of that until you get up into Hellertown. That is some discussion that you'd have to have. If anybody right now says, no, that frontage needs curb and sidewalk, then that's a good discussion, but they would need to some direction on that, well, some indication, I don't want to say direction, but you do run the risk if you come in and township council says you have to curb the sidewalk for a 12-year natural disturbance.
I see.
Did you get the answer you needed for that?
I think so. I mean, it can be determined at a later time. I didn't know if there's any preliminary opinion. I mean, that's typically what we do, not that that matters necessarily, but typically we would defer such a request a deferral for these items. Usually it depends. It depends on the circumstances of your township, and ultimately it's your decision and the ultimate decision of the supervisor, or the council, sorry.
Yeah, and it would, it depends on how that, whether it's in an agreement or there's some security posted or whatever to make sure that that happens.
Yeah, we'd work out all the details. I just didn't know if there was a preliminary opinion on that. And with regards to 412, we can discuss this at a later time, but, PennDOT is pretty particular, and they're gonna want, they dictate what this road's gonna look like. And usually that's grounds for that, but again, I think this is a discussion for a different day.
I guess, will there be a crosswalk or anything at this location? If anybody wants to go get lunch or something over at the giant complex, they can walk across the street?
Yes, there would be, and we've kind of tried to depict that in conceptually here. There would be traffic signal poles there, pedestrian signalization. Might have seemed like the flashing man hand, so it's a man when it's going to walk, and a hand when it's not, and whatever PennDOT, I don't know, there's whatever the latest PennDOT requires, would have to install.
So is your plan gonna have sidewalk like it's shown on here when you're submitting the PennDOT?
It will have sidewalk along the state highway, like
we're looking at
this sidewalk right here.
Mm-hmm.
That would be on the PennDOT plan. Yes. PennDOT requires that there be either a wide shoulder or sidewalk. It's a requirement of PennDOT. And Hanover made a comment about site circulation and sidewalk. I acknowledge there's a couple of things we need to clean up here to make it better, and we can work together on that. I had no further questions. I don't know if anybody else had any further questions.
Anybody else in the commission have any other questions at this point? Well, hopefully we gave you enough direction. We're going to come back with a preliminary plan application soon, I would imagine.
Thank you, that was helpful.
Thank you. Well, any comments? I don't think we had any signs. Do we have a sign sheet? Okay. Are there anybody from the public who would like to comment? If you want to get up and state your name, please.
My name is Craig Hay. I live on Springtown Hill Road for the moment. First of all, let me preface my comments by saying how refreshing it is to come into this hall and hear people sitting up there concerned about people out here. Very refreshing. Don't give it up. I was not happy about this when it all came to come to pass. That was a decision that was made by Township Council to change the zoning. It made a lot of people in that area very unhappy, which I think was reflected in the last election. That being said, I personally would ask that the council look favorably on such a project, simply because, number one, it provides a valuable service to the community. Number two, it would be aesthetically pleasing. And number three, it's a much better idea than bringing in a warehouse or a strip mall. The warehouse gives you the truck traffic. I'd rather have the cars, and it's during business hours. All right? A strip mall, we need another one of them like we need a hole in a head. I'm sure Sheets would like to put one of their places in there. They're building one up on 4th and Emory in Bethlehem, which is going up like a house of cards. And that's going to be in competition with Wawa. Now, wouldn't they love to be on the south side of Wawa? And does the township benefit really by having something like that there? I don't see it. You've got positives going here. Something that most people aren't going to appreciate is leaving those trees in place. I can tell you that they've been there for about 37 years, and they're a source of environment to all kinds of wildlife. They're aesthetically pleasing, and they will provide a beautiful barrier, a natural barrier. Another point that I'd like to touch on is the lighting situation. It's been my experience that St. Luke's and their various locations is very, I want to say, minimal on lighting. There's more lighting pollution coming from the shopping center across the street right now than you will have from this medical building. I was in contact with the zoning and code enforcement officer in the past about the LED lighting on the tobacco store, which would be on 24 hours a day. Nothing was done about it, but I think economics have stepped in and now they're turned off after 10 o'clock at night. Now there's a dry cleaner further up towards Giant that has, I don't know, 3x5 lit up signs. They're lit all day and all night. I can tell you they shine in my house and I don't like them. All right, so let's put the cards on the table. Any number of things could go in here. Thanks to the previous township council, something is going to go in there. I implore you to make it nice for the community.
Any other public comments, questions?
If I may, I'm sorry, I'm over here. My name is Victoria Optoff Cordero. I'm a resident in Lower Saucon. I am also your council liaison for the Planning Commission, so I thought it might be appropriate to sit over here just so you all saw me and know where I am. I did, as a council person, receive an email today from somebody requesting that their comment be read in tonight's proceeding. And that person is Nanette Keck, who I believe owns the lot, and maybe the spot that you were concerned about.
She owns that southern to the side, east of the south.
Yeah, with
To the
the,
south of the base.
is that, and I'm not sure if that's the same one that you were worried about screening. If that was the question, I think you mentioned
know
a
what that
gentleman,
is?
different. She doesn't list her address on here. 1710 Mount Pleasant Road.
She would be on the left side of the road.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just reading her statement without any comment for or against it. I'm just reading it because she asked me to. Hello, my name is Nanette Keck of 1710 Mount Pleasant Road. I sold part of my property across from Giant. I wanted to say I am very proud to have a medical building on the property and will be continuing to live next to it. I do understand that they do not pay taxes, but I truly believe this building will be a benefit for the people of Lower Saucon and surrounding area. We don't need another pizza place or bar. Thank you. And then she finishes with just saying, I would like you to read this at tonight's township meeting. I would like it to be part of the record. So I'm reading that for Ms. Keck, for the commission's
Is she
consideration.
a property owner of 1710?
I believe so. I believe that she owns the
Yes.
parcels.
That's the one I was wondering.
I told her.
The only,
That's the awful one. She's from Pleasant.
Oh, is that?
aside from Ms. Keck, as a resident, I did have a question regarding the three areas of variance that you were concerned about with the driveway, and I think it was 0.79, 0.5, and 0.75. Sorry, yeah, 0.5, 0.75, and then 1/10 of an acre. I thought were the three figures you said. as disturbance above what was permitted in the zoning ordinance. And I don't know if this is possible, so maybe Mr. Tucker can answer this question for me also. Is it possible to grab other natural resources somewhere else on the lot to make up for the disturbance on this section? If that makes sense to you, like you have over disturbance on this section of the driveway, as I understand it, and maybe, I don't know if it's ever been done where you could, there's other sections of your lot that you're not using that you could try to, provide extra compensation in the form of other natural resources on the lot to help minimize disturbance overall, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the biggest one you identified was 8 to 15% slopes. That in your disturbance, I think I remember correctly. So that would be difficult for them to create more 8 to 15% slopes. But any of the woodland areas, you could offer to plant.
I was just going to say, in the past, in a lot of developments that I've done, this type of question has come up. And I think after a further investigation of the site in terms of where some of the existing tree lines are and the requirements for the landscape trees for the site, I've offered to plant additional tree in Lake Park or some other such place to make up for some of that deficit.
And St. Luke's has previously on other projects certainly done that.
No, I think you're going to see a very cooperative applicant.
That's all my questions, thank you.
Okay, no other questions? Thank you for your presentation.
Thanks very much.
All right, next item on the agenda is public comment, non-agenda items. Anybody have any comments not related to this application? Hearing none, move on to approval of the minutes, December 21st minutes. So, Steve, how would we work this? Because a number of the members here weren't on the commission, weren't present. Did they still vote on the minutes?
Yeah, the people who were not here for the last meeting would not vote, but you're allowed, whoever can vote, votes, because this gives much more information than anybody needs. But we have a quorum for the meeting because we have the number of people who started the meeting. So that's good, so we can actually vote on it. The only people who should be voting are the ones who were there. And all we need is the majority of those people who were there. So for example, if there's only 3 of you, 2 of you would have to say yes, and it would be approved.
Okay, so at that meeting was myself, Chris, and Jennifer.
Thank goodness Jennifer came back.
Yes. Okay, so motion to approve. Can I get a second? All in favor? Aye. All right, a motion for adjournment. All in favor? Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chris. Doesn't say that much.